Hello, BookTube. I'm back with another blast of completely random book recommendations for you. This is an avalanche that was kicked off by Christopher Russell, our little corner of BookTube's cartoon Hedgehog, who made a video in which he just talked about a few books, just a handful of books. And I never needed much of a motivation to do that myself. So I started just bombarding you with book talk. Just random book talk. And I'm still doing that. I don't know how long we're going to continue it. I don't know how thoroughly imprinted I am with this hedgehog pattern, but we can certainly do today. And I want to start off with an old book. I don't know, as in all these cases, I don't know if this is still in print. I don't know if any of these things are still in print. But if you see it secondhand, this is by James Milne, and this is a London book window. And this is a series of literary chats, basically. This is not, James Milne was not, when he was writing on this subject, he was not a deep writer. He's not a particularly profound writer. He's writing about the normal book column stuff, the type of book column that I have written on and off for 50 years. And I don't know if any of the rest of you have tried it, but it takes a familiar form. When I read these columns or when I reread them, I automatically know what was in his mind. I know which ones of them were him grasping for something, and which ones of them have a little more tailspin to them. This is stuff like musing on what makes a bestseller, or book browsing in Windows, or curling up with a bestseller on a rainy day, or that sort of thing. Very comfortable little book pieces of reflections that are in some ways eternal. Even though a lot of the outward appurtenances here have changed. A strong recommend, if you can find it, because, well, what more universal a language is there for all of us than to read about just the musings of being a reader. Then the next one is by Pauline Gedge. She was once upon a time a best-selling novelist of historical fiction. I don't think she's in print anymore, and she had a couple of really well-known books. And this was one of them. This is The Eagle and the Raven. About the Boudica revolt. I have to stop myself from saying Boadicea. This is a Boudica revolt, a revolt of native Britons against Roman rule. It's a big, fat, sumptuous historical novel that, when push comes to shove, the Boudica story is fairly well documented, and what isn't explicitly documented can definitely be accurately inferred. And some of those details are Game of Thrones level brutal. And Pauline Gedge does not shy away from that. But there are rolling scenes of action here, and wonderful characters, not least the main character, but others too, British warlords. This is a terrific Roman historical novel. I wish I had a copy. Then we have something, this is by Peter Brand. This is, I don't remember when this came out. This is a big biography of Ramses II, the great Egyptian pharaoh. And there have been a lot of biographies of Ramses, and I always say on this channel that biographies and histories ought not to be considered the latest from the teletype machine. They ought to be considered as works of writing on their own. But nevertheless, if actual research has continued in your field, then the latest book on Ramses II might not be as well written or as insightful as earlier books, but it will have more grounding in what we now know is true. Whereas something like the latest biography of Charles de Gaulle or Julius Caesar, a comparison that de Gaulle would have liked, won't have that. It'll be the author going over the same ground. That can still be very, very fruitful. But in a case like of Egyptology, there was a great book on Ramses II that came out about a generation before this. A great, towering work. I'll probably get to it on these Hedgehog book recommendations. But that book did not know as much. It's not just a question of insight or how you write. That book did not know as much about Ramses as we know now. As Brand knew when he wrote this book. So, and it's still good. I mean, it's not as well written as some earlier books on Ramses, but not as fluidly written. But it is a towering work of scholarship. So if you're interested in ancient Egypt, you're definitely that's the biography of Ramses that you're going to want to have. Then we have Kenneth Rose. Kenneth Rose is a terrific, wry, witty author. Wrote a really good biography of England's King George V, a figure who does not warrant it, a small, petty, carping, ugly, stupid figure who does not deserve the wise, discriminating biography that Rose gave him. And Rose, I guess, made a pattern of that, because this is his book Curzon, about George Curzon, the Viceroy of India. And Curzon also was an absolutely odious, horrible human being. He does not deserve as a biography as wonderful as this is. Talk about skill at writing. Oh my. This is wonderful. It's all about the pomp and circumstance of the Raj, or the jewel in the crown of the Raj. It's all about Curzon and his stupid, imperious ways, but it's also a broader portrait of a world. This was a world in which the last world, in which it was assumed that the upper crust of English society, the Eton and Oxford crowd, the titled crowd, the landed aristocracy crowd, weren't just lucky in terms of a genetic lottery or in terms of inheritance taxes or whatnot. They also were the natural rulers. That if you put together a cabinet, like we see in Trollope, if you put together a cabinet for a government, for the government under the monarch, well, you would be asking yourself in that cabinet which nobleman you would have, which nobleman you would call upon, and it's not because they have any experience, except that they have all the experience. They have ruled the world. And the best of them had that actual experience. I don't know that I'm explaining myself right, but it has no exact parallel until 2025, when the fascist government of my country put oligarchs in charge simply because they have money. They don't have any breeding. They don't have the country estates. They have instead escape bolt holes on islands of their own that are carefully been scrubbed from navigation maps, but that have 10 years stockpile of non-perishable goods, potable water. They have bug-out islands. All of them do, because they definitely want to leave you and me behind. But they've been given control of a huge amount of the ruling of this country. They don't control the military. And they don't control the camps into which the rifle butts will put them. And they don't see that. And they didn't 100 years ago either. They are the greediest and the most gullible members of society, those oligarchs are. So they will be astonished. When the Gestapo comes for them, they will be astonished. But that's only a rough approximation, because the world that Rose describes here, and I got the impression when I've read this book, I don't have a copy of this, I wish I did. I wish I could find a copy of this. But when I read it, I got the distinct impression that world, the world of Curzon and all of his aristocratic colleagues, that the world interested him more than this cramped, crabby, stupid moron. The world is wonderfully evoked here. So definitely worth it to find. I don't know what your likelihood would be of finding it. Maybe Kenneth Rose's biography of Curzon is in print in the UK. I could see that. I don't think it ever was in print in this country. Then we have something by Carolyn Weber. This is an odd book. It's very well written and very thoughtful, very thought-provoking. That's why I want to include it here, even though I don't think there's a single word in it that I agree with. This is called Surprised by Oxford. It's a memoir about Oxford, and Oxford is beautifully, lovingly described here, except when it's scathingly described. But it's also a memoir about gaining faith, about awakening as an adult into Christianity. Hence the echo of C.S. Lewis's book, Surprised by Joy, which is itself a literary echo of Milton. So that's what's going on here, is that this is a faith memoir. It's not just a memoir, it's a faith memoir. Ends up being that. By an author who comes to Oxford in bits and pieces, all tattered and angry and at sixes and sevens with all of her beliefs and all of her friends and all of her family, and finds a great boon in faith, in the last place on earth she would expect to find it. And it manages to work. I mean, I know this is stating the obvious. I always say, I'm dealing with experienced readers here, so I don't really need to state the obvious, but it's my job to be repetitive. My job to be repetitive. So I will point out that I don't need to agree with the memoirist to like their memoir. Then this next one, I have read this, but I read it out of the library, nowhere near Boston. And I would love two things about this book. I would love to own a hardcover copy, and I would love to interview the author. If I could make those two things happen, I could die contented in about 80 years when I'm 100. And this is Sasquatch, Legend Meets Science by Dr. Jeff Meldrum. This is... there's of course a million books on Sasquatch. Sasquatch is Bigfoot. And there's a million books on Bigfoot. And there's, again, as with most subjects, there's only a shelf of them that are worthwhile, that are actually worthwhile. And this is probably the most worthwhile one of them all. By a believer. Jeff Meldrum is an expert in primate kinesthesiology. He's an expert in primate feet and hands. So he is one of the few people, one of the few experts in Sasquatch lore and evidence who isn't really all that concerned with the blob-squatch blurry photos or even the Patterson-Gimlin film. He's one of the only ones out there who isn't all... I mean, he studies those things and he talks about them. He's interviewed in almost every Sasquatch documentary. A nice... I've never met him, but he seems like a nice, decent, grounded guy. Much like Bob Gimlin himself, he seems like the kind of guy who's not a nut. He's not a loon. He actually takes this seriously and thinks it should be taken seriously. As he always says, science begins with a question, not with a set of dogma. And he's one of the only people out there that gets interviewed like that who is looking at the gigantic amount of evidence that we do have. People always say, well, what evidence is there? There's no body. The hair samples are inconclusive when they're done in a lab. And then there's the film. And there are a few famous footages of Bigfoot. The most famous one by far is the Patterson-Gimlin film, which, like I mentioned the other day, half the people that look at it, their immediate response is, that's a guy in a costume. You might think when you're talking about Sasquatch evidence that that's what you're talking about. But Dr. Meldrum says, well, that's a kind of evidence, sure. But what about these thousands and thousands of footprints that everybody talks about? These footprints that were known about Bigfoot before the Patterson-Gimlin film and that have continued to be found. What about them? What if an expert in what a primate would look like if he put his foot on the ground examines these? So he does examine them and continues to. And has made a whole bunch of interesting claims about them. I would gladly take a copy of this book in a paperback, or even an e-copy. But I would like a hardcover copy of this book. And more than that, I would like to interview this guy. I'd like to do a 40-minute Zoom chat with him about this whole subject. I actually have a calling card. If I knew in any way how to put this idea to him, I actually have a calling card. I have done an interview with a Bigfoot expert on this channel. I can show Dr. Meldrum that my approach is curious and respectful. I'm not looking to debunk anyone here. I am the first person to admit how utterly unlikely it is that there is a giant breeding population of enormous hominids unknown to science in the Pacific Northwest or elsewhere in the world. I'm the first person to admit how unlikely that is. Nevertheless, he is not the only... He has commented on this, but plenty of other people have too, that, I found the tracks that I found when I was 10 days hiking in the backcountry. There weren't any pranksters around to put that there. I know what you're saying. I hear there are plenty of tracks that are pranks, but there wasn't anybody around. Believe me, I would have known. We were alone where we were when I found what I found. There are plenty of examples of that, countless of them. Anyway, I wanted to make a Hedgehog recommendation of this, even though I don't have a copy of the book, and I want it. I want a copy of the book. Then this next one is Oversize. This is by Mark Moffat. This is wonderful. It really is an eye-opening book of a place on Earth where I have never been. I've come close, but I've never been there. And that is the high frontier. This is the upper canopy in rainforests. And I have climbed trees in the Northwest. I've climbed normal trees. This is the trees that we think of in America. But I've also climbed in the canopies in rainforests. But not to the upper canopy, which is a world of its own. It's a world of its own. And some people in this book have done that. They've gone and looked at that world with creatures that never even come close to the forest floor. Never. Their idea of descending is to descend 50 feet to a lower part of the same arboreal group or the same large tree, which is colonized by a whole bunch of animals that never go up. So that is their idea. The animals that live up here That's their idea of traveling down, is to travel 50 feet down. Most of them. Some of them do go all the way down to the forest floor, but it is amazing what goes on in the upper canopy. The animals that live up there, the animals that drink all their water up there, the water is caught by those upper leaves and cupped, so that you don't need to go down and look for fresh water on the ground. They get their nutrition up there. They hunt and are hunted up there, far, far away from where ground animals are. This book does a better job of evoking that world and describing it than any that I've ever seen. I've read probably 5 books on the upper canopy because I confess, I wouldn't have the courage to go that high. I wouldn't have the courage to do it. I was pretty much chickening out when I was only, 50 feet off the ground. But to go all the way up there, where that person is doing, oh God. I'm eager to eat up the report, specifically because this is a place on Earth I've never been. So those of you, and you can see on this cover here, look at the flower growth up there, high off the forest floor. How just utterly incredible. I guess we'll go on from there. It's a strong recommend. It's a beautiful big picture book. Then we'll go on to Dumas Malone. This is a multi-volume biography of Thomas Jefferson. Every single segment of Jefferson's life gets a volume of its own here. We do no longer live in the age of the multi-volume biography. For good or ill, I think it's ill. I think there's a particular kind of reading experience you can only get from this kind of thing. Much as I'm of course a big fan of big fat doorstop 1-volume biographies, but there's something you get from a multi-volume that you can't get from those, and you get it here. Malone is a great writer. There's a little reserve in my voice, as you can hear. Probably some of you can guess where I get that reserve. I'm not a fan of Jefferson. It has nothing to do with Dumas Malone. I'm not a fan of his subject. Almost not at all. A moment here and there. But otherwise, I not only am not a fan of Jefferson, I deplore him. Absolutely deplore him. Not just for all the things that he didn't do when he could have, but also for the fact that he's one of this huge coterie of founding fathers that set in place so much that was evil in this country. A long time ago, a friend of mine, his name might be known to you if you're familiar with certain eras in American history, fervently planned, seriously planned, forever and ever, for weeks and weeks, months and months, he fervently planned to distract the guard, only one guard at the time, much more relaxed era, have a friend distract the guard long enough for him to go into the Jefferson Memorial and actually use a hammer and chisel. He was a sculptor, among other things, to chisel the word rapist into the wall of the Jefferson Memorial. And I talked him out of it. I said, you'll go to prison for a long time. That's a felony. You'll certainly be caught, and you'll go to prison for a long time. And all the dreams that you have will be derailed by that fact. Don't do it. And he didn't. But he should have. Somebody should. Some odd. Spray paint will do. Because before anything else, that's what Jefferson was. He did it from when he was a teenager until he was an old man. But anyway, he also did a few other things. I'm grudgingly willing to admit. And Dumas, there have been other great biographies of Jefferson. If you can find the whole set of Dumas Malone, this multicolored set, definitely do. Definitely give it a try. If you think you're in the mood for that much company, there are also famously multi-volume biographies of George Washington, multi-volume biographies of John Adams, who was not a rapist. But anyway, let's move on from a serious subject to a subject could not get any lighter. This is not really a kid's book. Kids would love it, but it's not really a book either. It's just a chance to smile. That's all. This is by Christian Wheeler, and this is called Treat. And believe it or not, all this is a picture book, and all it is the exact moment a whole bunch of different dogs were brought into a studio, sat straight, and they were thrown a treat, and a picture was taken at the exact minute before they get their treat. And it's amazing. It's wonderful to just page through here. It will put a smile on your face in the grimmest possible mood. It is just a delight to go through. I won't spend much time on the one dog breed that didn't do this. The one dog breed that saw a treat, they all cocked their heads into a triangle and just stood there while the treat was thrown at them. What are you doing? What are you doing? Okay, it's a treat, and I like treats, but explain what you're doing. This is odd. Why are you doing that? Nevertheless. And then we have, the iPad wants to show me something that is not fit for human consumption. I've been taking architecture pictures. There we go. This is Joy John. This is the first book on what turned out to be, this is not a kid's book. I don't know that Treat is a kid's book, but you want to be careful, in fact, about using Treat as a kid's book. Do not encourage your children to want a dog by showing them dog picture books for kids. If you don't have a dog already, that should not be the reason that you get one. And you don't want to torment them, right? If you don't have a dog and you're not set up for one, then exercise a little care to make sure your children's books don't show them dogs. But anyway, this next one, you're perfectly clear. There's no dogs in this one. This was the first one, what turned out to be a raucously received series of kids' books. This is The Bad Seed. And all the books in this series are great. All of them are, from the Good Egg to The Bad Seed to the Bad Seed is about a seed who's thoroughly bad, in a bad mood, not liking anything, not liking anybody. And you just turn the pages. All kids will know about, they'll have heard the term bad seed or good egg or whatnot. And of course, like all good children's books, there is a message here. It just doesn't beat you over the head with it, which is great. You don't want kids' books to beat you over the head with the message. You don't want any book to beat you over the head with the message. And the message here, of course, as you know, I'm not spoiling anything in a 6-page book, is that the bad seed learns maybe to be less bad by the end of the book. All the books in this series are wonderful. I don't know if they're made into a set, but they're all wonderful. And then we can finish up today these Hedgehog reviews, these Hedgehog recommendations, with a book that came to my mind because of one of the main characters in the book is actually a hedgehog. So I couldn't resist. I've recommended this book 1,000,000 times to you over the years. 1,000,000 times. It is astonishingly wonderful. And it's T.H. White. It's the Book of Merlin. This is the fifth and final chapter of The Once and Future King, but it is published as a separate book. And there's no spoilers here. The Once and Future King is the story of King Arthur and his Knights of the Round Table and Lancelot and Guinevere. And Arthur gets older as the book goes on. It takes you from him as a little boy pulling the sword from the stone in the Sword in the Stone, which is often made into its own book and was made into a Disney movie. And at the end, a very old and bitterly disillusioned Arthur is snatched out of time. He's snatched out of the normal passage of time by his old tutor, the wizard Merlin. He's brought to a burrow under the earth, a very comfortable hobbit hole, where Merlin and a bunch of animals will discuss with the king the worth of humanity. Whether or not the human species is good, is worth striving and even dying for. Whether or not, in other words, although it's never put this way in the book, whether or not humanity is worthy of King Arthur. And there are pros and cons. There are animals that think one way and animals that think another. There's a snake, there's a goat. Arthur, of course, has his dog. There's Archimedes the owl, who perches on Merlin's shoulder. And in many ways, the hero of the book, there's a feisty little hedgehog he has some great moments in the course of, this is not a long book like The Once and Future King, but it is utterly magical. No pun intended. It is utterly magical. And the hedgehog, Hedgie, has some, moments of dialogue in the book. And then at the end, White must have recognized something. I don't know, maybe he just loved the character himself. At the end, the hedgehog owns the book. In a classic moment. If you've read this book or read any of my writings about it, you will know exactly the moment that I mean. It's the most beautiful thing that this author has ever written. And the only one who's there for it with the king is the hedgehog. But anyway, that's it. That is the last recommendation for today. Oh my God. But I'm going to wrap this up now, and we will see if we have more Hedgehog recommendations tomorrow. If so, I'll see you then. Thank you.